I'm on a quest to find music and art. Supporting local talent is the place I start. Yeah, this is our culture, the place to be. Games, books, arts and crafts and jewelry. This the guardians of the geekery. 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 And now for today's episode of Guardians of the Geekery with your hosts, Matt, Carol, and Joey.
Hey, get thee to the Geekery, my friends. It's the Guardians of the Geekery podcast.
Hello.
Good
morning, everyone.
Welcome
to the podcast. Welcome to Guardians of the Geekery. So this morning, we are acting spacey clearly because we're around the Space Wizard Publishing Company. Great segue, guys. I know that was totally pre-planned. So this morning absolutely. We've got William Tracy online. And he has got Space Wizard Publishing, and we wanted to talk a little bit about that. So thank you for being here this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about Space Wizard Publishing and kind of what kind of books you focus on.
Yeah, so Space Wizard Science Fantasy is my publishing company. I started in 2021, so I've been self-publishing before then, and then my writer group was all sort of like, we want to put out more books and we want to self-publish them and we don't want to do the self-publishing. So I was like, I already have all this stuff in place. So, okay, so I'll branch out. And the first thing we did was an anthology, which I will have, Distant Gardens, which is lesbian-themed romance, sci-fi, fantasy anthology with a theme of strange plants. So all the stories will have that. But my publishing company is focused on queer science fiction and fantasy, often with a hopeful theme. So I'm working to uplift queer voices and POC voices, sort of the people that you don't see as much mainstream publishing. So that's mainly what I focus on. Almost all of my stuff has some sort of queer content in it. I'm bi as well, so I get to be the token white guy, and
but not so cis, just token white,
right? Yeah. So what I like to say is I like to use the fact that I am a white male and have that social sort of hierarchy that we wish we didn't have, but we do, to help sell this and get marginalized voices out there where they wouldn't have as much volume otherwise.
And using your masculinity in a positive way.
Hopefully, yeah. That's what I try.
So tell us a little bit about your look and why you've adopted that, and I believe that correlates with some of your books as well. So
yes. So my wife and I love to cosplay, and she is an amazing seamstress, and she made this as well. This, you can see, it has TARDISes.
Oh, TARDISes! Nice.
Yep. And it has these are all the Gallifreyan symbols. So this is one of the ones I wear. I'll usually, if it's like a multi-day con, I'll come in different keeps every time. And this is my writing hat. So,
keeps all the thoughts inside, right?
Yeah. So it's actually not the one I use while writing. It's just the one I use while selling the books.
Okay.
But yeah, I like to have that as sort of the persona. You can recognize me. I do a lot of different markets and things like that. So you'll see the hat, you'll see me dressed up, and I have people come over and recognize me. It's funny. I've actually had people not recognize me when I don't have the hat on. So
right, yeah. It's like me and the flamingo stuff. They're like, no.
Yes. Exactly.
So I'll ask you what I asked our last publishing friend, which is easier, writing or publishing?
That's a hard question. I actually like editing more, and I do developmental editing for our publishing house as well. And I like editing my books after I've slogged through it and gotten all the words on there, editing it and making sure everything works out. So I'm actually going to say I like the publishing aspect better, because then I get other people's stories. I get to see their cool ideas that they have, and I get to champion those stories. And like I said, I want to get those voices out there. So I like taking that and seeing all this new stuff come in and being able to publish stuff that I can't write. and I have a lot of books now that I couldn't have written, and I can get them out to people. So yeah, I like publishing.
Awesome. There's a title you have that is my favorite as I was looking through your website this weekend, but it's Of Mycelium Men. I just
Yes.
absolutely love this title.
Yes, and of course that is one of the books I don't have with me right now. Yeah, I meant to bring that with me, and I did.
I can edit a picture of it in there, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's really
But
cool.
yeah, that is my new series. I can't believe I didn't put it in this pile. Actually, I know why, because I picked from books I had just sold from, and I didn't have any there because I sold out, so that's why I didn't have them.
That's great.
So I guess that's a good side of it. But
Yeah.
Mycelium and Men is my new hard sci-fi series, and it is a generational fleet that has landed on a planet that's entirely covered by a sentient fungus. And
Ooh.
so I get to play around with that. The fungus actually has a point of view in the book, so you get to learn about that. You get to learn about all the colonists, and it's very much in the vein of like the 1970s, 1980s, like hard sci-fi generational ship sort of stuff. Except it's a sort of a post-gender society. People can decide what gender they are. They can, whatever family or family group can have children. So it's very inclusive. And but yeah, so that's the first book. The second one is called To a Fungus Unknown, and I am just about to start the third one, which is coming out next year, which is called The Spores of Wrath.
Ooh.
That'll be the whole trilogy. Yeah.
So how did you get started in writing? Have you always just been a writer, or is this something where you just felt that there was a lack somewhere in publishing, and you decided to write toward that lack?
No, I don't think it's ever been that I've found a lack. If anything, more that I'm trying to get my books out there where they're a weird cross genre that's not usually something that's sold. And but to your first question, I've been writing since I was a teenager. My dad is always very strong in his writing style, and I was homeschooled for part of my education, and he helped out with my my writing side of it. So he was like giving me back edits on stuff. And he's much more of a scientific writer. He's a doctor. He was in chemistry in college, so he's got the scientific side. But I branched out into creative writing when I was a teenager, and just started writing little stories. Never really finished anything, but wrote a lot. And actually, my main series, which this is the first one called The Seeds of Dissolution. This is a science fantasy with music-based magic. So it's a space opera. There's aliens, but there's also magic. People can walk from world to world. There's no spaceships, so it's very much a fantasy element, but you got aliens in there, which is why I'd say it's sort of a hard sell. And I couldn't really place that anywhere, and eventually self-published it. That was the one I first started writing when I was a teenager, and that was awful. But I put that book away, wrote other stuff, and came back to it. And the published version is probably the 7th or 8th time I've rewritten that story. So I promise that one is much better than what I originally wrote. But yeah, that sort of started me off. I liked the science aspect of it and the fantasy aspect of it. I was trained in mechanical engineering, and I also was trained in classical violin. So those came together with that music-based magic and helped me write that. And I have this sort of science aspect in it. The magic has some scientific basis, in that the symphony that the magic users can manipulate is underlying the universe and creates the universe. So when they change notes, it actually changes reality, which is based in vibration theory, which says that everything can be made up of a sequence of mathematical vibrations, if you look all the way to like the atomic level. So I like to put some science in the back of my books, and even if you read it, you don't see that, but it's there.
Very cool. I like the intertwining of the of music being part of that book too. I think that's pretty cool to use that to. Yeah, I just think that's really neat. I haven't read a lot of books that really science fiction or science fantasy that use music a lot. Sometimes they're describing a song or something like that, but I find that really, really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that one catches a lot of people's attention. It's actually fun because I sort of have a mental list of most people are like, oh, no, I've never heard of that. And every once in a while you find people that's like, oh yeah, I had this other story that had music-based magic. And they're very rare, but it's good to sort of see, what else is out there. But it's you don't come across it a lot.
The other title I really liked was in the description you've got on your website right now is "My Heart Is Human."
Yes,
by Reese
you have that one.
Hogan. Is that right? Yeah, Reese Hogan.
Yeah, so that's this one.
Oh, cool.
This one actually just came out in July of this year. So this is one of my new series of books. I do a Kickstarter every year in June for the next 12 books that are coming out for that year. I do 12 books a year for my publishing house, at least currently. So that was the first one from this year that came out. That is another near future sci-fi story. And this one has a trans male protagonist who is trying to keep an AI from taking over his brain while protecting his daughter. And it's written by a trans male author as well, who is also a friend of mine, and his writing is excellent. I've edited several of his books, and anyway, I was very excited to finally get this one, so I get to publish one of his books. Yeah, that's a great read. It's been selling really well. It also has the trans colors on the cover.
Oh, yeah.
So I get a lot of people who come up to my booth that, either they have a child who's trans or they're a trans person and they're looking for something with themselves, they can see themselves in the story. So that's something I love to see at markets is people come up and I can give them a story where they can see themselves where they haven't seen themselves before.
Well, we're really excited to have you at the market for that very reason. Just we always want it to be a very inclusive atmosphere. That's something Joey and Carol and Wanda have really built from the beginning. So we're really excited to have you debut.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and speaking of the market, some of these titles that you're talking about are available for pre-order, right? So
Yes.
If people want to make sure that you don't sell out like you did with Mycelium and Men, they need to make sure that they go on your website and do what?
So right now, I'm actually in the midst of getting a new website developed, which may be out. It should be out before the market. Anyway, if you see the new website at some point, you will have a shop specifically that you can buy books. Currently, if you go to the website as it is for the next few weeks, if you just email me, it'll have a link under basically all over the site. Email me at wctracy@williamctracy.com and just tell me what you want, and I can ship out books. In this case, I'll have pre-orders, so I'll just bring them with me to the market. But can also ship out books if you want that way.
Yeah, great holiday shopping. So
Yes.
Definitely keep that in mind if you're interested in any of the titles that we talked about today. So, Carol, you asked the one question you normally ask, publishing or writing. Now I'm going to steal your other question that you normally
It's
ask,
okay.
and that is for new writers. What are some tips that you usually give them, either from your writing perspective or as a publisher? What are some tips that you try to give individuals who ask you about getting into the writing field?
Yeah, I do have a lot of people come up to the booth and like, oh, you're a publisher, and well, I have this book. My first question is always, have you finished the book? And that's about 50-50. So that's the
Easy
first
to
part.
start. It's easy to start. It's
Yep.
hard to finish.
Yeah.
Finish the book. But then the next piece of advice I have is if they're like, oh yeah, I finished the book. The next piece is go back and look at the story, because the secret to writing is you can go and change the story, change the words around before you publish it. You don't have to write it and that's it. That's the whole point of writing. You look at it, and the first draft is really the story that Neil Gaiman said. This is a story you're telling yourself. Or actually, it was Pratchett, I think. But the second draft is what you're going to tell other people, or the second or third draft, or however many it takes. So the second piece of advice is after you finish the book, go back and read the story and see if there's anything that you promised in the beginning that you did not fulfill in the end. That is my major hurdle. If I read a book and there's something that really cool that comes up at the beginning, and I read all the way through the book and I get to the end, and I'm like, that didn't come up. That's one of my pet peeves. So fulfill your promises.
Nice.
Awesome. I like that. And then you're not just bringing your Space Wizard publishing. You have a few other items you do. You're a beekeeper.
Yes.
Is that right?
I am. We've been beekeeping since 2021. I can see them out my window, see one of the hives out there. They're fascinating creatures. We got into it. I've always wanted to keep bees, and we finally got around to it. So we have a couple hives now. And one of the things we do is we don't have enough honey to sell yet. I get that question a lot. Hopefully next year we'll have enough. But I do have a lot of wax products, which means I can create things like this.
Oh my God, it's a gnome.
Oh,
Yeah.
So you should know something about me. I'm a gnome malicious. I have gnomes at the ready at all times.
I can save one of these for you if you want. So yeah.
Although it might be sad watching him melt.
That's what people say, and I always say you don't have to burn it. You could just set it on your counter, but they smell really good. You can't smell it through the Zoom, but
we don't have smell-o-vision. We didn't upgrade. Sorry,
not yet. But they smell really good. They smell like beeswax, and so they smell like they have a honey component to them. So I've expanded this year. I am actually out of my tiny cute hamster, which is one of my new ones because again I sold out.
Happy problem. Yeah.
I do have the dino.
Oh,
very cute.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then I may have one of these. These take a lot of wax, but it's a very, very cool box all wrapped up.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But I have a few different molds there, so I'll have a selection of candles. I'm almost out for the season, but I've got my last bit from the wax I collected. So that's one of my seasonal elements that I bring.
So do you feel like being a beekeeper has influenced your writing in any way?
Yes, actually. Two things. So the Distant Gardens that I showed before, that one, this anthology is now turned into sort of a series of anthologies, and I have the second one, which is Farther Reefs, which was lesbian stories with pirates and mermaids and sea creatures. And by the time I get to the market, I will have the third one, which is called Lofty Mountains. And that one is, again, more lesbian and sapphic relationships, but that's with mountains and steamships and clouds and journeys and things like that. And my story for that one is two rival cities of mega bee writers who sort of a Romeo and Juliet star-crossed lovers sort of story, but they ride these giant bees. So there's two basically humans that live with colonies of giant bees. So I just finished writing that story a couple months ago. So yes, they have gotten into my writing. There's also there's sort of a plot element in the Mycelium and Men story that they actually get. They get sort of taken over by the fungus, and their fungus sees that they're cool little communication creatures, so learns how to use them.
Nice. I was afraid you were going to say you got stung so many times in your hands you couldn't type anymore. Or
I actually had that happen. I got a swarm earlier this year that was up in the eaves of a house, so I was up on like a 30-foot ladder in a full suit, trying to scrape these bees into a bucket. And I actually was borrowing my friend's beekeeper suit, and she had just washed the gloves. So I had the entire suit, but not the gloves.
Oh, no.
And borrowed some like gardening gloves from the people who were there, which have a nice like latex front and then a mesh back. So mesh does not stop bee stings.
Ouch.
So I'm doing this and going, ow, 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 ow. Climbing down the ladder. I went back to their houses. My hands look like sausages. But that disappeared after a couple of days.
Good.
And then you also said you had a little bit of jelly, right?
Yes, I also have some jelly, and I should have let's see, the market's in November, so I should have some of my apple butter and applesauce, which also sells out very quickly. I don't have any now because it's sold out, but that's a seasonal, so I'll be getting apples early in a couple weeks. I also have spiced apple jelly, which has the Space Wizard logo on it. And then I have some grape jelly, which is from muscadine grapes. And
nice.
And I have a combination, if you like that. I have the grape apple jelly. And those are all from my dad's property up in Virginia. He planted a big apple orchard and grapes, muscadine grapes, and York and Yellow Delicious apples, because he was trying to make a lot of apple juice. So it's again, that's sort of tied into my family loves nature, gardening, beekeeping, all that sort of stuff. So I go up there once a year, get a whole bunch of apples and make apple butter and applesauce and jelly.
Which is great to have on a plate beside you with some scones while you're reading your book, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it all
Exactly.
just ties it together. And then you're going to go over to the Rooted Dandelion, who will be there, and grab
Get
some
tea.
And you can have tea, and you can have scones with jelly, and read a good book. So about fungus, it makes a winning night for me.
Exactly.
Well, tell us where people can find you on your website.
Yep.
You have two, right? You have the Space Wizard and then your own, or is it all one?
I currently, yes. Again, I'm in the middle of transitioning. I'm going to have a very nice new website. I've seen the first couple drafts of it. It's going to be very, very nice, very clean. But yeah, I have two websites, my personal website and then spacewizardsciencefantasy.com. Both of those are going to be rolled into spacewizardsciencefantasy.com. So that will have all of my books, the charms and things. I have like keychains with the Space Wizard logo, and
you do. Yeah.
And the celebratory octopus who's wearing the Space Wizard hat.
Oh, I love it.
Little pins and charms and things. All the books will be on the website, all the charms and pins. I may put the jelly and candles on there depending on how that goes. Again, that's very seasonal, so I have limited quantities of those. But yeah, go to spacewizardsciencefantasy.com and that should have everything, all my books. Also, if you're interested in publishing with me, I have a submissions page. I also do developmental editing. My wife does copy editing. So if you just need that done with the book and you're going to publish it yourself or go somewhere else, I'm also available for that. So yeah, all sorts of things.
Well, William, thank you so much for being here today. And we look forward to seeing you in just like 54 days.
Yeah.
It's not that far away. It was like 90 days. And now we're like, no, it's like 4 weeks, 5 weeks.
Coming up fast. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's fun to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having us, and we'll see you in a few weeks.
All right, great. We'll see you then.
That was an episode of Guardians of the Geekery. Thank you for listening. Check us out at guardiansofthegeekery.com and stay tuned for more content.